Welcome to the Performance Rehab Authority podcast. Today we have Dr. Ray Gorman as a guest interviewee on the show. Ray, thanks for joining us.
Roger, thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, so just a quick little background on Ray. He's a physical therapist, strength coach turned business owner. He started off in cash practice back in 2015, way before it was like a real thing even, and then now has pivoted to his performance provider growth model, right, which
Yeah,
blends some in-person clients as needed with digital management that really allows a ton of life flexibility outside of being tied down to a clinic. And now he helps coaches and rehab professionals like solve the problems he experienced by helping them take their services in this digital blend fashion, just like he has.
absolutely. So
Cool, glad I nailed that.
you did a great job, man. That was it. That was very succinct.
So what were you gonna say?
I said you did a great job. That was very succinct. But basically, I was saying, yeah, it's funny how you start to create a business around the problems that you experienced yourself, right? And I was having a conversation with my mentor the other day of kind of like that first principle of business, like, why does your business actually exist? And I think for me, it was actually being a physical therapy patient and asking myself one day, like, why am I here? Like, why am I physically in this space to do these things? And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a big catalyst towards developing the model that we now teach today.
And it's funny because it's usually like a precipitating event, right, or a problem that you're having
Yeah.
or you've gone through. I mean, it's just like even with the Con Ed course we have, right? Like that came about because we were having such a hard time like finding qualified clinicians to hire in the first place. And then when
Yeah.
you have somebody that maybe isn't up to speed and you bring them on board and you try to like train them in house, like then it's a shit show. And so the problem we were having, we're like, you know what? Here's a solution that we can make for us and for so many other
Yeah.
people as well.
You guys bring up a good point because I think part of what we see as an industry, right, is like there are really no two physical therapists that treat the same. And I think that can be a blessing and that can be a curse. But like when you're creating a business and you're trying to create some continuity, some characteristics of similarity across providers, I think it can actually be a big liability to a business if provider A kind of treats and manages one way and provider B treats and manages another. Like you almost kind of end up confusing your consumer a little bit, and there's not like this skeleton backbone system of how do we do things, why do we do things, and I think we share a lot of similarities in why we've created what we've created because of that.
Yeah, that was very well said. Like, it is good to have variety in some context, right? Because you get the different schools of thought and you get different viewpoints, and everybody can grow and become better as a whole, as like in the industry, if they're open to, they're open to other people's opinions.
If
That's
they're
the key.
open to it, if they're open to it.
But internally in your business, if you're telling somebody like, "Hey, these are the things that you need to be doing," and at the same time, there's another provider telling somebody else like, "Hey, those aren't the things that you need to be doing. You need to be doing
Yeah.
this," and it's like, even just overhearing different schools of thought with another clinician treating near you can like that can cause some issues and some questions. Never mind if one provider's out and you still want them to get the care, right? So they see another
Yeah.
provider and they don't even understand how the initial provider's thought process works, like then that can cause some confusion, some issues for sure.
100%.
Yeah. So what as far as you like helping people kind of transform their career
Yeah.
and have this more like kind of hybrid with the digital approach, like I'm kind of curious, like what part of the journey are most people on when they come to you? Like, are they like new grads? They've been a cash practice owner for a while, or like are they stuck in brick and mortar? Like, kind of, where are people?
Yeah, I'd say we kind of have two pretty distinct avatars. And, I think one of the things that you learn in business is like the version of your business or the version of your offer that you start with likely isn't the version that you end with, right? So when we started our business, and actually when you and I initially met, the idea was like, oh, this is a no-brainer for physical therapists who own their own business, who maybe have themselves or maybe two or three other clinicians, and want to scale by a mechanism of process over a mechanism of people, right? And the thing that we learned was like, it's really hard to sometimes teach an old dog new tricks, right? It's hard to change the way a business operates. It's scary for businesses to change operations. So we kind of pivoted and said, hey, look, there are a lot of new age clinicians that are kind of coming out into the world that like they don't want to have a model that is brick and mortar, all in person, relies on sessions. And that kind of required us to like revamp our offer to put a lot more business education within it. So as of right now, we kind of have the person that is, looking to start out their business. They're looking to start a cash clinic, but they don't want to go the trading time for money session route. And then we also have some providers that have a little bit more of an established entity, and they're really looking to kind of diversify their offer to create a little bit more continuity, to generate some recurring revenue, and just diversify the business a little bit.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. In like teaching old dog new tricks, like changing a business,
Yeah,
it can be hard to have some of that because initially, right, that was like kind of like a bolt-on thing that you and I were talking about like
correct.
years ago, right?
Correct.
Like years ago. And if you've got a practice that has multiple clinicians and it's like trying to get everybody on board and change things, like it's not just one clinic. It's like you've got to get everybody on board and make sure they want to do it. And it's like so if you just build it that way from the ground up, like then it sets it.
Exactly. Much easier when the project is green, right? Like when we can mold it, when we can help them establish what the entity is actually going to look like. And that's not to say that we haven't successfully implemented it into clinics with multiple providers. It's just we've learned a ton from the trial and error of what our initial thought process was to build this out. And I think a lot of people who build their business or are looking to build their business, they think that they're going to nail it on try number one. And I promise you, anyone listening or watching, like that is not going to be the case. You've got to go through kind of that messy middle of figuring out where your product is the most sticky.
Yeah, absolutely. And like having a coach is so helpful with getting through so much of that stuff fast. You still have to get through it though, right? Like our business doesn't look anything like it was when we first started it. And it's kind of like anything else, right? Like if you're not growing, like you're dying essentially, right? Like you have to see if there's like product market fit and like meet the demand because you have something that you think is great, but
Yeah.
you don't see where the holes are and you don't see where other people think holes are. There's unforeseen problems, and you don't even know that people want that thing. But the idea is still there, and it's like, all right, so what modifications do I have to make to like make this thing like sticky? You know?
You also may have extremely unrealistic expectations
Yeah.
of what is supposed to happen, right? Like because when we build something out on paper, we're building it in this vacuum where context is perfect, right? We're saying, oh, I build this offer and then my consumer goes through that and then they just escalate naturally to this offer and then they go to this thing. Or I launch this wait list project, this I get people on this wait list and then I open the floodgates and 5 to 10% of people on my list convert when I thought it was going to be 80 to 100. Like you just don't understand the reality of these things. And one of the things that my coach has done a really good job helping me do is kind of like settle into like realistic expectations of business, because I think that there's like this balance of realism and dream slash vision that you need to maintain as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, right? If you are too high up in the clouds on vision and dream and you set things that are unrealistic, I actually think you can set yourself and your team up for failure, right? If you're overly realistic on what are kind of the numbers that we're looking to hit, I think that you actually hold yourself back. So I think that that's another concept that I've really had to figure out how to blend for myself as well.
That's such a hard thing to nail down, especially if you're trying to figure out without a coach guiding you around. Like
Yeah.
goal setting in business is the hardest thing because you want to set these like what are they, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? The
Sure.
BHAGs.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, you also don't want to set goals that you just repetitively fail, fail,
Yes.
fail. It's like I used to set goals that were so high that I wasn't even like on the same planet at the end. I was like, I'm in the
Yeah.
wrong solar system. That's how bad I that's how bad I
Right.
failed my
And
goals.
and objectively, you may be doing a great job, right? But like you're giving yourself this negative reinforcement of the process, and therefore you're like, it's failing or it's not working, or you're not motivating your team because you're almost just like behind them cracking the whip, like harder, harder, harder. Like it's something that I think takes some time to learn as a leadership skill, whether you're leading yourself or leading a team.
Yeah. Leadership is a whole podcast in and of itself.
For
Like when you
sure.
think you're a good leader versus when you
For
actually
sure.
are a good leader
For sure.
and the lessons that you learn along the way.
Yeah.
So taking that kind of like the information that you need to have viewpoint and applying
Yeah.
that to like the virtual setting. So or like the hybrid digital stuff. So,
Yeah.
what kind of information do you think a PT who has no experience training virtually needs to be able to take this and have this success in a virtual or a combination setting?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just making sure that like one, like what we do and what we teach at Engage Movement is not a telehealth model. And generally it is not a full virtual model, right? We do have a few of our clients that are biased, probably 90% online, but they came in with a lot of structure, with a lot of bones, they came in with like this very moldable offer that's like, hey, I've got buzz, I've got clients that want to work with me. I just don't have a system to fulfill with them, right? So we do work with some clients there. But the meat and potatoes of what we do is that model that we call the performance provider growth model, which actually blends an in-person and virtual offer, right? So in a lot of cases, what you're seeing in the space, in the evolution of the space, is you're seeing people say like, it's either in person or it's online, right? And what we're saying is like, that's a silly way to look at it. My ultimate goal is to give the client exactly what they need at the moment in time that they need it. So if that is biasing them towards in-person sessions, I bias them towards in-person sessions. If that's biasing them towards a virtual asynchronous offer, I put them on a virtual asynchronous offer. So I think that that's just a really important distinction, that like that type of business is so much easier to build than a full virtual business, which I think people get. They get sold the dream and it's just like it doesn't execute. Like that's just the reality, right?
But you mean I can't just work on a beach? I can't just grab ads and just hang out on the beach all day?
You've got to really fall in love with the process of building a virtual business, and you've got to really like adjust your timeline expectation, right? Like 12 weeks isn't going to do it. Hell, a year may not even do it. Like we're 3 4 years into this game now as a virtual business, and we're really like just at the point where we're starting to gain some traction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I honestly I think that having gotten into like the more virtual business game
Yeah.
myself now, too, it gets way harder to build a
Yeah.
business virtually than like a local service base. I can just go out and demonstrate value. Like I can go literally anywhere if I can get in front of people locally and walk away with clients. That's
Conversations that would take 15 minutes in person can take 3 months online. People
yeah,
don't get that, right? And that's just because how responsive is somebody to their DMs? How much do they trust you to take it to the next step, to get on a call with you, right? Like what does your nurturing process actually look like? How do you replicate some of these touch points where like when I was building my clinic, it was like I could just go to a gym, drop in, say, "Hey Raj, it was great working out with you today. I noticed you grabbing your back. Like everything good there?" And you're like, "Oh man, it's been bugging me for so long." Well, now I can pull you into my ecosystem and I can service you in a way that says, "Well, look, man, you're already doing a lot of the right things in the gym." Like it felt counterintuitive for me in my practice to then say, "But now you got to come do another hour of exercise with me." right? Where it's like, no, like, why don't you just pay me for my expertise and I'll help you moderate your exercise and actually get better in the environment that you want to be in, which is your home facility.
Yeah, I think that's also an issue with like a lot of the cash practices in general, is that just the way the model is set up is it sets the expectation of like they're tying it down to your time, and they're not selling an outcome, they're not selling
Mm-hmm.
people getting better, they're selling a number of visits, right? Like, yeah, the outcome is attached to it, but there's a package of visits for a lot of them, or whatever that looks like, and then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so that can drag out for forever, or they accomplish their goal and they're halfway through the package, and then it's like they just hold on to them and they come back in a year, or they set an expiration date, right? And then it expires and they come back like, but it expired, and now I'm upset. And you're like, I tried to call you 100 fucking
Right.
times,
Right.
right? And it's your fault. So I think there's a lot to be said for that, for sure.
Well, and I think that we are actually dealing with especially in the performance realm, right? We are dealing with a much more fitness and exercise educated consumer, right? And like for me, when I go to physical therapy, if I were to go to physical therapy, I would want somebody to work with me in a capacity that I couldn't do myself, right? So like I don't know what your view on manual therapy is, but like if I just go to a clinic and it is nothing but exercise, like to me that is going to probably turn me off as a consumer because I'm like, well, if all I need to do is the right amount of exercise, why don't I just go into the gym and try to figure out like the recipe of what I need to do, right? It kind of, in my opinion, it kind of takes away from the value of that. So like
Mm.
I saw that as a big problem and it was like, yeah, like once I teach you the skill of what you need to do, you don't need me to watch you do the exercise. You need me to manage the volume. You need me to manage the decision making process. But you still need to come in for me to maybe work on you, for us to do some soft tissue, for us to do some of those things that really build a strong bond between the client and patient. And in some ways, I feel like we've almost like shot ourselves in the foot as a profession by this message that like nothing matters and everything heals on its own. And it's like, then why do we exist, right?
Yeah.
Like, then why are we here?
Yeah, that's a whole that's a whole conversation, man. That's the internet, right? Like the movement optimist. Like, hey, it doesn't matter how you move. If you're gonna get hurt, you're gonna get hurt. And it doesn't matter what you do to rehab because as long as you move, you're gonna get better. Like that's just not true,
Yeah.
right?
It doesn't matter unless it matters, is the
Yeah,
reality, right?
yeah. Until it does, right? It doesn't matter until it
Correct.
does.
My favorite concept around that is, movements, this concept that we teach in our course of movements versus patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like for example, if I'm doing a deadlift, it doesn't matter how I move it to complete a deadlift, right? Weight from the floor, standing up. I can do that in a hinge pattern. I can do that in a squat pattern. For the movement of a deadlift, it does not matter. Now, when I'm looking at, training volumes over a long enough period of time, if I have somebody that is constantly pulling a deadlift from the floor in a squat, and when they are also squatting, they're moving in a squat, you can't tell me that that person isn't more likely to kind of develop some sort of overtraining injury that has to do with the squat pattern. You can't tell me that the loading mechanics of the deadlift in front and below of your center of gravity are different than if I'm doing something like a hinge, right? So like it's, I see that you're doing this movement, but are you actually doing the pattern that it's meant to be done in? And I think that is one of the cases where it starts to matter a lot. It really starts to matter of like, how do I break down this client's movement pattern? How do I understand that if they are missing posterior chain length, the compensation is going to be lower hips, which is therefore going to put them in more of a squat dominant pattern, right? Like that's the way that we want our providers to kind of think about this and help create that story. And I feel like that's where there's a lot of crossover between our audiences as well.
Yeah, hell yeah. Because then they come in and they're like, I have anterior knee pain. And you're like, yeah, because
Yeah.
everything you do loads your knee. Like there is no movement variability.
Yeah. Or I only feel deadlifts in my back. Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
you don't actually know how to hinge and you've never even activated your hamstring in a way that contributed to the movement as though it was supposed to. Like, it's just things like that that I feel like are a lot of common sense type stuff, but
Yeah,
that get washed away in this like n equals one of, for most people maybe it doesn't matter, right? But like we're dealing with a top 1% of people who like have already invested in their health, who are role models for the rest of the community that maybe needs to get into fitness. And I think it's important that we recognize that in your client population.
I think that's an excellent point because I am guilty of like neglecting to think of that sometimes,
Mm.
right? Like I posted something on Facebook yesterday that was like it was an Instagram post I like shared to Facebook, and I
Sure.
was like, hey, hot packs and like silly stretchy TheraBand exercises are not rehab. Like you need to be like lifting heavy, working hard, and sweating. And the caption was something like, "Hey, doing the same silly stretchy band exercises as a 90-year-old lady next to you, ain't it?" Right? And somebody commented locally here, and they're like, "I disagree. I'm doing that, and I'm getting better." And I was like, "Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear you're getting better. Like, just curious, do you like, are you a fit individual? Like, do you
Yeah, like what do
run
you do? What are you
like
trying to
regularly?"
get back to?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
okay, cool. So like for you, that's fine,
Hmm.
right? But the people we work with are not that person, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of that messaging that is meant for the masses doesn't make sense for our consumer, right? Like, for example, the movement is medicine. Like, yes, I get what you're trying to say, but like, my consumer is generally overdosing on it, right? Like,
Yeah.
my consumer is overdosing on it. So, like, if I just say movement is medicine, I don't actually teach them what the appropriate dose of movement for them is or what happens when they do too much of that. I actually do my community a disservice. And I think we'd agree that like the traditional PT realm, like I actually don't think it's designed as poorly as people say it's designed. I think it is designed appropriately for the people who need to consume that type of care, right?
Hmm.
Like I think it is designed for volume. I think it is designed for the masses. I think that when certain people go into it, they don't get the outcome that they want, and that's kind of why you've seen this boom in cash pay performance realm because like that's not just what we're trying to get back to. That's not what our consumers are trying to get back to. They're trying to get back to higher level skills. They're trying to get back to the activity that got them out of a place of obesity, a place of diabetes, a place of, mental health issues. Like that's at high stake for people who are healthy, fit individuals. And I think that gets minimized sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you word these things very eloquently, and I'm
I
like,
appreciate
that
that.
just makes. Like, I'm like, that makes so much sense. Because I've previously talked about how I don't think that the insurance model is going away ever because there's always going to be a market for it. But
Bingo.
then just differentiating, like, hey, it's actually just completely different markets. Like
100%. Yep.
there are a lot of people, like I found out on Facebook yesterday, that they go in these places and they feel much better. And it's
Yep.
like because the demands on their body typically are so low anyways, and it's just it does work for that
Correct.
population. For the people it is designed to for, like it works great if you have a pretty sedentary lifestyle and you don't really value moving on a high level.
And the problem that I think we also see is when we move clients from a third party payer model like the traditional PT model, we're trying to now move them into like a fitness type offer, at least in the way that like conceptually the pipeline would work, right? But the problem is, once somebody has to actually invest their own funds in it, like prioritization of resources kind of pulls them away, and they're like, oh well, maybe I'll just go back to doing the things that I want to do, or like it's just such an interesting dynamic of like there's this massive problem that exists, but there is not actually a psychological level of behavior change that has happened that is deep enough to move that person into the true fitness continuity offer. Like it just doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, which is I don't know, there's a human nature of getting in their own way.
100%.
It's if we go back to the two different models, right, of physical therapy, I was just making, when you were talking, I was thinking about like a dietitian that works only with those that are morbidly obese, like on my 600-pound life. Like that is going to be very different than somebody that's working with a high level CrossFit athlete,
Yep.
right? Like and they typically aren't going to mesh well with the with each other's populations, right? The
Right.
mindset it takes for one versus the mindset it takes in the other, like they're so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where that person is on the spectrum of health is the Venn diagram overlap is extremely skinny or potentially non-existent, right? And if you approach one of those audiences with the wrong offer, the wrong messaging, which I think happens a lot in our space, right? Like we go after a performance audience, or we see therapists go after a performance audience with a very much like insurance model mindset. And I think I did it myself too, where it was like, I'm gonna goniometry every joint in this person's body, right? Like that was like what my first eval looked like. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, I actually don't even need this thing. Like I just like don't even need this thing, like, because I'm not trying to like justify these incremental things, because the only person that actually cares about this outcome is the client in front of me, not justifying it to the insurance company to get them to treat. And so they care about like what's happening to my performance in the gym, what's happening to my overhead press, my pull-ups, my snatch, my clean and jerk. Like those are the things that really started to resonate with them.
Yeah. I have a goniometer somewhere. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, it's
There's one.
somewhere.
Yeah, there's we do have one in the clinic
You could
somewhere.
find it if you needed it.
But yeah, so then I mean same analogy, right? The CrossFitter versus the morbidly obese, taking it and bringing it back to that like psychological shift of going from from health into that wellness realm
Mm-hmm.
of fitness. And it's kind of the same thing there. Like people get to this point where they're like, well, I'm not as bad as I was, so like I'm just gonna stay here. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that comes down to like being able to help people past that like little plateau area where they can just hang out at good enough, right?
Yeah.
Is it's just the ability to communicate with them and like show them that there is more, and then ask them to set goals into that realm and do it with them, where there's so many providers that have that insurance mindset that you're talking about, that bring it in and it's like, all right, you're out of pain, and then we're done. Or they're like, hey, we can keep
Right.
helping you, but they don't know how to like one pre-frame this situation of we're going to get you out of pain and then we're going to make you better, and then they
Yes.
don't know how to go about helping the client make the decision to do it, which in a nutshell is sales, right? They don't
Yep.
know how to sell it. They don't know how to have a conversation that ends with the client saying, I want to do that, here's my goals, let's do it.
And this is where I think people lean into that concept of bridging the gap between rehab and performance, but they don't actually have a process in place that allows them to do that, right? So this was something that I had leaned into heavily as I was learning return to sport principles, as I was working in sports medicine. I was like, man, like nobody is we can't do this in the traditional clinic, right? Like we're not set up for it. So you brought up a good point that we're constantly balancing this thought process of price or cost versus value, right? And when somebody is in pain, the cost of what we do is relatively low and the value of what we do is extremely high, right? Now, as they start to feel better, well, guess what starts to happen? The cost and value start to creep in on each other, right? And so the problem that we run into when we're only selling sessions is now we say, well, Raj, you're out of pain, but you've got to keep coming in to get even better. But is that new problem worth 150, 200, $300 a session? I don't know that the consumer sees it that way, right?
Yeah, I'm busy.
and
I'm
and
not.
and you don't want to, and you've got other people, like you've got other people you want to treat. The consumer has other things that they want to do. Like you've got
I meant
to,
me as a consumer, sorry. I
yeah,
meant
yeah,
like
yeah, no, but both, right? Like you've got other people that you want to see. The consumer has other things that they want to do. So what I kind of recognized was like, okay, well, can I pre-frame, like you mentioned, that when problem A is done, pain, problem B exists, the gap from where your tissues are and where your mental readiness is, right? And so when we actually transition somebody away from in-person sessions onto what we call a prescriptive exercise program, that is the digital or virtual aspect of our offer, all we're really doing is changing the service medium to better reflect the solution for that problem, right? So as I start to need to accumulate volume for my clients, well, if I'm only seeing you once a month, once every 2 weeks, that's not enough process to accumulate meaningful volume. You're not going to come into the clinic 3-4 times a week to do that, but you're already going to the gym. So let me just program that for you virtually. Let me build it progressively and gradually over the course of the next 3-6 months so that we actually get you the complete outcome that you're looking for and can get your tissue capacity back up to where your mental readiness is, right? Like that's really how our model works in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, makes total sense to me, right? Like underloading runs rampant
Mm-hmm.
in rehab, even in the performance realm. Underloading runs rampant because again, people go to that out of pain and say, okay, but we still need to build that tissue tolerance in the capacity,
Yes.
and that is not done overnight, right? If you're looking at a 2 month or 3 month like rehab process to get the tissues desensitized, kind of return to a baseline level of function. Okay, well, where's the process there to then increase the
Yes.
swing in the same spot all over again, right?
And you've probably seen this, but this is the number one thing that ruins great results, right? Is your client goes back into the gym and says, "Oh, I was feeling great and I just wanted to see where I'm at."
Mm-hmm.
Like our clients are constantly searching for the ceiling. And the danger of that is like we don't know when we're going to break through, right? Now,
Yeah.
what we are trying to do, and this is what I tell our clients to explain to them is like we are trying to reestablish the floor. We are trying to consistently raise the floor of what you can do so that when you do have this big spike, it's actually not a big spike anymore, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
actually just a normal spike in training volume. So I think that is, that was the number one thing that I realized when it was like, oh my gosh, like you were doing so great. And then like you just went and did something that you weren't prepared for. And that's just because I didn't have a great process to manage that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important to throughout the rehab process, like you're doing, with the programming, is walking people back step by step into doing the thing.
Yeah.
All right, I mean that's that's a big part of it. I had somebody tell me once when I was at a CrossFit gym that I went to rehab. I was having knee pain with squatting. I went to rehab. It was super helpful. I was like, oh, okay, so like you're able to squat now without knee pain, and they laughed. They're like, no, it still hurts when I squat, but like they really helped me in physical therapy. And I was like, wait a minute, what the fuck did you say to me? Like, did they help you? And they're like, yeah, they were great. And I was like, how did they help you? They're like, well, they got rid of my pain. I was like, but then you went back to squatting and it still hurts. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, so did they help? And
It's like,
they're
did,
like,
did they
oh,
help or did you just like your physical therapist?
yeah. It's like, so it didn't actually, and that's what it is a lot of times, right?
For
Like
sure.
when we see people that have gone other places, like, yeah, it's kind of helpful. And that's really code for they're a really nice person. They tried really hard. I like them and I don't want
Yeah.
to say anything negative about them. But
Yeah.
you're still having a problem. Like if we have somebody that has back pain with deadlifting 400 pounds, right? Like they will be deadlifting 400 pounds before we are done working with them. And they'll be
Yeah.
doing it on whatever regular of a basis they need to be doing it to have the tissue capacity, the confidence moving forward. If you
Yeah.
don't do that, you don't know if
I,
you've done it. You win. Like,
I've blown people's minds where it's like, okay, I have knee pain with squatting and I haven't squatted in X amount of time, right? And they're like, what are we going to do? And I was like, we're going to start squatting 3 times a week. And
yeah.
they're like, wait, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you have a tendon issue, right? We're going to put you through what's called a heavy slow resistance protocol. We're going to appropriately load this tendon and we're going to stop shying away from load and we're just going to teach you how to respect it. And it's amazing that like you give them this protocol and they're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that I was going to be working this hard in rehab. And it's like, look, like no offense, but I don't need to babysit you doing 15 reps of HSR. Like, I just need to know that you did it and I need you to report these things back to me. And then I need to come in with my decision making criteria that says, okay, we've got the tendon to this baseline, right? Now let's reintroduce some plyometrics. Plyometrics are going well. Great. Now let's reintroduce some running volume. Now let's reintroduce some running intensity. Like, and we can extrapolate that out to pickleball, to golf. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Those concepts are really the same, and we can still use our system for those people, and just breaking it down in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah, but you mean I'm not going to get a hot pack and spend 10 minutes on the bike for no reason when I come in?
Only if I'm running behind on my schedule.
That was yeah, like it makes sense, right? Like that's the science behind it, and then it's just I don't know. There's so many PTs that don't get it, and then taking that, and if that's the protocol, right, and you don't need them in the office, and you're not going to be doing manual therapy, like fulfill on it virtually. Check in with them. What does that look like, right? Like if you move somebody more towards like a virtual option on the back end, like what do those check-ins look like? Are they long, like you have 30-minute check-ins, hour-long check-ins? Like what's going on?
Good question. So, a typical journey for us would maybe look like somebody comes in and we would position that we do, 10 sessions over the course of the next 4 months. We give them kind of the expected cadence, right? Once a week for 4 weeks, once every other week for, 4 visits, and then maybe once a month for 2 visits. Now, for me, I'm very comfortable with virtual asynchronous management. Like I had a portion of my career where like that was all I did. I had a portion of my career where I only taught and educated people on how to do that. So like these concepts and systems are just like ingrained in my brain like a second language, right? So for me, I generally try to position somebody and put them on what we call that prescriptive exercise program right at the first visit, right? Now, that is something that brings in recurring revenue to the business because it is going to extend beyond our in-person sessions together. So once I get to a point where like I've got my data, I've got my program created, we're not really doing lengthy check-ins in the beginning because we're still having that synchronous visit, right? We're still having that in-person session where you're coming in, you're giving me an update. And then I really like to use a flexible check-in process. So like for me, it's part of the solution is checking in with you as much as you need to get the information that is appropriate for that time. So if that means that we need to check in more frequently, we'll check in more frequently. If that means we don't need to check in, like sometimes I've been on programs where it's like, okay, I don't actually need this check-in and it is a value detractor, not a value add, right? I think as the person doing the fulfillment, as the provider, I think we always assume that attaching time to an offer is valuable to the client. And I don't actually think that's the case. I think if you're getting the outcome and you can save that time on both ends, great. So now I'm reviewing your program weekly. Based on your comments, I'm making progressions, I'm leaving comments. And so what I've actually done is I've tied revenue to an outcome, kind of like you mentioned truly in the beginning, where it doesn't matter if it took me 5 minutes to service that client or 25 minutes to service that client. And that's how we can be really efficient with getting our providers sometimes into, the $1,000 an hour range because they can just service so many clients within that programming system that they don't actually need to deliver time or trade time, which is one of the things that can zap a lot of the provider value out of the offer.
Yeah, and that's a great point about being a value detractor when you're adding more time. Like, that just made me think of my personal fitness coach. Right, everything's done over, their app or True Coach.
Sure.
But they have their own app. I'm just on True Coach. Either way, and then she's like, "Hey, time for a check-in. Like, schedule a 30-minute call." I'm like, "I'm fucking busy." And we've been going back and forth. like over like text comments, things like I'm happy. I don't have anything to talk about. Like,
Yep.
but I actually don't want to schedule 30 minutes.
Yes.
Do I
Yep.
have to?
Keep doing
She's
what
like,
we're
well,
doing.
yeah. She's like, no, no, you don't have to. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna meet with you. Not because I don't like you. I got other things to do, and I think things are going
Yeah.
well. You
And
know?
it's so common that I talk with people and I'm like, okay, tell me about your virtual offer, right? And they're like, okay, well, it's this. And then it includes 2 30-minute sessions per month. And then I'm like, okay, have you ever actually done the math on that offer? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you think that offer makes you money or costs you money?
Yeah.
And like they've never looked at it that way, right? Because now it's like, okay, I've got an hour of check-ins. It's taken me an hour. It takes me an hour per month to program for this client. Now I take what my revenue is or what my rate is, and I divide it by two, and that's my effective hourly rate.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, like I'm actually getting less than the visits. So like we really teach providers a solid system to not run into that problem, right? And that's kind of the beauty of what we're able to do as we evolve the field of performance rehab. So
I think that's awesome. I think there's one last thing I'm curious about. Like, if somebody was interested in getting the ball rolling towards having this blended model with the digital fulfillment as well, right? What would be the first step you'd recommend to them?
first step I'd recommend is come over to our Instagram and start consuming some content, right? Because we put out a ton of free stuff on podcasts like this where we talk about the concepts. But the first thing that you really need to do, if I'm not saying just like hire a coach, right? Because I do think that's obviously the fastest way. But the first thing that you actually need to do is you need to start changing your mindset around how things are currently being done so that you can start doing things the way that you want to do them, right? So, like, one of the biggest problems that I think people have with this concept is they're like, well, isn't this just like an HEP? Like, I'm already giving this away. And my thing is like, maybe you are just giving away $300-400 of value per month. Like, do you want to continue doing that? Or do you want to actually create some rules that diversify a home exercise program from a prescriptive exercise program so that you can actually solve a problem in your business, right? So the first thing that you need to do is you need to come in with an open mindset that like the way that we've done things was made up. So all we're doing is remaking up the rules, right? You're giving away so much value. You're giving it away. And unless that is truly baked into your session cost, which 9 times out of 10 it is not, like you are actually creating a mental bandwidth problem for yourself because you're giving away access to clients that you could be that you could be charging for. That's really like the biggest thing I think to start.
Yeah, I remember the first time you said that, and I was like, oh shit. Like, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because even in the client's mind, it's like they're paying for the time that they're coming to see you.
Yeah.
And if they don't get the time that they're coming to see you because that's what they've been sold, then they get a little finicky about it. But you're also giving them all of these other things that you're not charging for because
Right.
you're just paying for the visits, right?
Yeah.
So
So
I think
changing that mindset is key.
that's fantastic. Well, I think this has been great, Ray. Thanks for being here, man, and thanks for being part of the drive for changing the industry, right?
For
Like
sure, man.
life is busy as life and like services become more digitized, people become more busy consumers as well, right? And there's a lot of more and more physical therapists that don't want to get tied down to trading dollars for hours, forever, and
Yeah.
not having their income tied to their time, being able to sell outcomes instead of visits. I think this has been super helpful.
Yeah,
So
100%, man.
you
Yeah.
mentioned Instagram. Where can
Yes,
people find?
if you are looking to find more information, you can follow me on Instagram. It's at Ray Gorman DPT. And if you're looking just for more information on what we do, you can always head over to our website, which is engagemovement.com.
Dope, and we'll link that in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
So once again, Ray, thanks, man.
Raj, thanks for having me, man. Always a pleasure.